This reaction of the political parties towards these happenings, is it because of us being the third model of secularism?
Well, I wouldn't put it in that direction. I would say that in very complicated world of Indian politics, the question of religion and secularism is distinct. It's unique because you both have a history of tolerance of the Muslim minority and episodes of intolerance. And when you have our political institutions, including the Constitutional Court, the justices sitting as the Constitutional Court, trying to negotiate this and trying to make a balance that will both respect the rights of Muslims and simultaneously effectuate secularism. It's very difficult, and I think there is no simple solution to any of these questions. The Babri Masjid question is a very difficult case to resolve, given what political pressures were on the court. And the court tried to avoid discussing religion at all. They tried to decide it just as a property law dispute in an attempt to depoliticize. So there I think the court's strategy was to depoliticize. And did it succeed? Well, maybe in some ways it succeeded. On the other hand, today, the problem is still unresolved. If you go to the location, as far as I understand, the problem is still unresolved. The Shabano case, involved the question of what is secularism here. Does it mean recognizing, Muslim personal status law, which in some ways is non-secular because it recognizes one religious denomination's role in making laws, but another way is secular insofar as it involves respect for at least some of the Muslim community. And what makes it even more complicated, of course, is that not all Muslims want to be governed by Muslim personal status law. Some do, some do not. There's no univocal Muslim position. So again, you see the court trying to navigate between these difficult things.
After 60 years, we have a rise of identity politics with AIMIM in Hyderabad, which is fighting for Muslim population, the BJP, which is talking about Hinduism. So,
and before that, you had Shiv Sena as well.
So how do you explain this new trends?
Well, I think I just will say two things. One, the rise of this kind of communal identity politics is not unique to India. In the same period of time, we've seen something similar happening in other countries around the world. We've also seen rise in fundamentalism, again, not only within India, but elsewhere in the world. So India is not unique in this regard. Some of this is a world trend. I think the second thing I would say is that when a polity becomes more politically mature, ordinary people have to undergo a process of figuring out what they believe. And right at independence, maybe it was not yet the case, maybe literacy was not broad enough, maybe cultural identity wasn't strong enough, the experience of colonialism was too recent, and identity had to emerge over time and more slowly. And as people begin to figure out their identities, politics becomes more from the bottom up and less from the top down. And in general, that's a good thing, but it also has risks associated with it. And so the goal for the institutions of the state is to try to manage these pressures while maintaining peace and maintaining respect for all persons. And that's the challenge, and it's a great challenge.
I think the distinct feature about Indian secularism is also that, unlike say of France or something which says we just be distant from religion, Indian secularism says that we promote all religions. That's kind of the stand that it seems to have taken. So in view of all of this, how do you place the uniform civil code? Do you think it's the way forward for India?
Well, I think I mentioned this in my talk. It depends on your definition of secularism. If you think that secularism is to treat the citizen directly from the state's perspective without the intervention of religion, then the Uniform Code would promote secularism. But if you think that secularism is to treat all religions equally with respect to their own experience, it would not be very secular, because for the average Hindu, it's no problem to have a uniform code, but for the average Muslim, maybe not all Muslims, but many Muslims are bothered by the idea of being governed under this code. So from their perspective, secularism would be against it. So I don't think secularism can solve that question. I don't think it can solve that question. It's a hard underlying question of choices.
Again, one more thing, you have made a case stating it's the general public who makes constitution last.
Yeah.
And the elite make the constitution. And the constitution's core values should be actually satisfying the minority.
Both, yeah.
But with respect to India, people are very myopic in nature. To mean general public, not all people, but there are people who are very myopic. They are concerned only with their immediate needs, and not with long-term vision for society. So how do you address this dichotomy?
Well, I guess my own view is that I don't think the Indian public is more myopic than any other country. I think every country has these tensions. These are not distinctive or unique. I mean, every country is distinctive, but in this respect, India is not unique. And so the underlying problem is, how do elites educate the public to values that they want in a way that's convincing to the public? And one thing we learned from the 20th century is imposing from the top often doesn't fully work. You know, secularism was imposed from the top in Turkey, it didn't ultimately succeed. It was imposed from the top in Iran, it didn't ultimately succeed. What is needed is social transformation to be domestic in a country, for the people who live in the country to adopt new views, and that involves a dialogue between leaders and the public. And I think that's the challenge to keep going. I mean, if you're being educated in public policy, you know, in a top university as you are, part of your responsibility and part of your job is to learn to express the values and beliefs that you hold in a way that makes them accessible to ordinary people, and it says to them, maybe you think the same as I do. And that increases the likelihood of working together, rather than saying, well, this is the right way to do it, you do it my way. That's much less likely to work, and in democracy, ultimately, that can work. Maybe you could do that in China, you know, where the political elites give the orders, but you can't do that in a democracy.
But sometimes those populist democratic practices like electoral politics, identity politics, you know, voting on communal lines,
Yeah.
do you think democracy can sometimes become a hindrance to true realization of secularism?
Yeah.
In a country
Yes.
like
I mean,
India?
I think there's a tension. I think there's a tension there. Yes. I mean, I think electoral politics is not always in keeping with secularism. I agree. And so then, the question is, when should the Constitution intervene to block those forms of politics? And I think the answer is it has to intervene very cautiously to guarantee the safety of individuals and the equality of citizens. But maybe it does not need to prohibit certain forms of political expression that are actually deeply felt in the society. That's the difficulty. That's the challenge. Maybe one more question. One more? Does that do it all? We get them all? All right, great.